But the government was involved in all kinds of stuff for a while. Mind control experiments, disease experiments on unwitting subjects, for example. The mind control, like with MK Ultra, that's the really popular one. We're going to train killers that can be triggered at any point. And it was really a test of how to break down the mind to control it and make it do what you want. So people went through some pretty horrendous kind of experiments with this. What's some other fun cryptids, right? You got Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. She's probably not real. Hate to say that to the folks at home. There's the Chupacabra, which we like. My personal favorite, the Mothman out of West Virginia.
Now that's a fascinating.
He's 100% real. E.T. the Extraterrestrial. That movie was big at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he was just excoriating the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese newspaper for saying that this was a good movie. Because he's like, this thing is obviously a demon. It's a freak. And they're teaching it that it's your friend and it's your savior. Avoid this. And people got so mad. But then you think back to it, man's got a point. You look at kind of what happened with UFO culture. We did end up with UFO-based religions, the Pleiadians and things like that. We ended up with a very notable mass suicide with the Heaven's Gate cult, which is an alien cult. You know, they wanted to ride the tail of a comet, so they killed themselves, among other things. Add it all up. And what do you find? A horrifying creature that is there to intimidate and scare you and destroy you, seemingly, that runs from the name of Jesus or the invocation of the will of God. What else you want to call that? You know, that's how we use rightly ordered reason to come to these conclusions.
Welcome back to On the Line. We've got just a quick update on Lit for you. We've actually just finished recording our 5th course with Dr. Joel Bierman on virtue and ethics. Fantastic course. We're very excited to have these 5 courses finished. But the updates for you are we're tentatively looking at August 4th for our release. Everything's looking good. That will be completed by that date. And we've also had a number of churches that have already signed up for the Lutheran Institute of Theology. If that's something that you are interested in learning more about, we've got professional packets available for you. You can either go to our website, and there's a pop-up there, and you can enter your email address there, or you can go to the description below, find my email address, bryan.stecker@ontheline.net. Just send me an email, and I can give you all of that information so that you can begin those conversations. So we appreciate your support, and we're excited for launch, but enjoy the episode. All right, and Bennett says we are live. So welcome back to On the Line, and today we're sitting down with Willie Grills, and we've got a lot to talk about. In the other episode that we record, we kind of give an introduction on brief history of power, but so maybe for this one, just what got you interested in history, kind of the complexity of topics that you cover with Kuntz, and then today we're really going to get into kind of this notion of, you know, that reality is not what it seems, that there's certainly a spiritual reality that's kind of knitted into all things, and that this is something that people throughout most time, both within Christianity and without, have kind of seen, and we've lost, you know, maybe because of materialism.
Yeah, history is an art and a science, and you have to know both aspects of it to do it well. We can't know why we're here without knowing where we were. And at the end of the day, it's just interesting. It's really boring to always go after the current thing, the current thing, the current thing. And so to go back to the old thing and see what that was, to see why we're doing it. Audience-wise, people are hungry for that. They want to know this stuff. At least our audience does. Predominantly made up of people who want to hear where we came from, how we got here as a country, how we got here as a people. History helps us know where we're going, especially as we repeat the same mistakes or seek to emulate the previous successes. And it's a cliche, but those who don't know history are doomed to repeat it. It is true. But it's also fascinating, and it's one of the best ways that we can honor our fathers, by knowing what they did and by taking the best of what they did. You know, today a lot of history is demonizing the fathers, those who came before us, male or female, you know, fathers and mothers in that case, but particularly fathers. And so we can show that a lot of these people that history wants to demonize or wants to paint with really broad brushes, we can show that these are actual people. This is why they made the decisions they did, why they said the things that they did, and what we can learn from that.
Were you always kind of a student of history?
Yeah, I think always. I can't remember a time when I wasn't interested in it.
What about the topic of today? Is that something you've always been interested in?
Oh, yeah, always. As a little kid, listening to Art Bell, late night AM radio. He covered all of these topics and more a lot of live-in calls. You get all kinds of weirdos and interesting characters calling in with their stories. He really lived the dream.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he set the template for a lot of radio that would come. And in a lot of ways, he set the template for some of what we do on the shows.
Did you hear the one where it's like a caller that calls in from Area 51 or something like
the
that,
famous
but
Area 51.
It knocks the entire...
It's knocked out, yeah.
Like, not even just like the radio goes down, but like the entire platform.
The entire thing goes
completely
down.
shut down. And then they come back on and they're like...
And there's a later episode where the guy calls back and claims it was a hoax. But that's what they want you to think.
All right, so let's kind of set the stage, for this. So, let me take a quick stab at it. You've studied this much more than I have, so I'm kind of want to bounce ideas off you. But one kind of notion that's helped me kind of frame it is that perhaps we don't realize the effects that maybe you could say the Enlightenment, but certainly kind of materialism has brought into the frame by which we look at the world. So, for instance, if you were to look at Neil deGrasse Tyson, if you were to look at any kind of popular scientific speaker on a public media realm, right? Not actually like those that are really kind of deep into physics and things like that. But the narrative that's put is we are animals first. We've evolved to kind of, randomly, the whole world has kind of evolved randomly to become what it is. So therefore, when we look at things, we always start with a physiological explanation.
Right.
And that's that's built into my, understanding. It's built into, like, we're trained in that way of thinking. So therefore, when things kind of outside of our normal explanation take place, or even when there's things in the Bible that frame thing in kind of a spiritualized way, right? We kind of naturally gloss over that, or we don't see it in its proper context. We just like to explain everything within that materialist construct. And, as you start to kind of poke at it from different areas, we've got a handful of topics to talk about, but it starts to unmask that, where you can start to see the world in a very different way. And it's a way that the ancients saw it. It's a way that the church fathers saw it. It's a way that, almost every nation, culture, civilization kind of saw the world as this like spiritual and physical, very much, there's almost a thin veil that separates the two.
Right.
So I don't know if you want to kind of speak to that as a premise.
Yeah. I mean, part of the modern notion is that our forefathers, no matter how recently you want to go back, were just primitives and didn't understand things. The modern pop culture scientists take away all the wonder out of the world. They say they don't. They say no to see it for what it is, and they'll wax poetic about pictures of galaxies or things like that, but it really rings kind of hollow because it always comes down to this naturalistic explanation. It's a running away from God in a lot of cases, and a running away from the unknown. They don't like the unknown. They like to discover things, but only if it fits within that paradigm. So anything that doesn't fit within that, the miraculous, the supernatural, things that we have to affirm as Christians, they eschew because it can't possibly be true. We do this a little bit implicitly when we read the Bible sometimes. I think it's important we don't do it as much with the Old Testament or with the New Testament, we do with the Old, where we forget these are historic events. So the flood happened, and that was a supernatural event. Creation is a supernatural event. The parting of the Red Sea, the plagues, anything, the miracles in the Old Testament, talking animals, demons, angels. Angels visit people. That's not a naturally explainable phenomenon. And so today they get mythologized in an unhealthy way. Even some Christians, they'll talk about Noah, but it's the moral lessons from Noah. Or they'll talk about the Exodus, and it's only about the moral lessons, forgetting that these things also happened in history. The lessons are absolutely essential to understanding the story, and yet the stories are true. So Jonah and the fish happened. That's a miraculous event. He was in the belly of a fish for 3 days and 3 nights. How does that happen? The rationalists would say, well, how did he not get eaten by the stomach acid? Well, it's a miracle. That's part of the point. But it gets turned into, no, this is just a myth to teach us a lesson about not running away from God. But if you start mythologizing everything, then what's the point in a lesson about running away from God? When the mystical or the wonderful or the fantastic is taken out of our understanding of God, he ceases to be God. He's a watchmaker at best. We come into a kind of deistic sort of Christianity. Because when God steps into creation, strange things happen. Sometimes he takes on human flesh and begins to multiply food and cure diseases and cast out demons. When God intervenes in history, the Red Sea parts. When God is far away and we can say, well, he's just up there, something started this, that lets us go about everything that we do just as if every day is ordinary.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't like the supernatural aspects of Scripture, then you lean toward deism anyway, and potentially towards atheism. Even something like the doctrine of God's providence, his care, and even control over all of creation, it gets really washed away in a lot of arguments that come down to free will. An argument that's purely based on free will, and one that excludes the invisible hand of God, is a rationalistic argument. It's a God who is presupposed to have stepped out on creation at some point. He's still there. He's watching over things, but he's not doing much. So it really doesn't matter what we do, except maybe at the last judgment.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we believe in a God who is active in creation. And we believe in a God who has invented not only the things we see, but the things that we don't see.
Mm-hmm.
The Scriptures affirm an invisible world. It affirms a aerial kingdom where spirits dwell. That's right there in the epistles. And you can't get around that unless we just say, well, that was the Second Temple understanding of the spirit world, but we have figured things out in our modern era. You know, that was just the trappings of the ancient world.
Mm-hmm. So what do you think about, let's maybe use this as kind of a good launching point. So, demons, for instance, right? It seems like today it's just kind of relegated to, maybe a temptation towards sin, right? So it's kind of like a loose temptation, and we might use it in that way. Is it Psalm 106? Certainly when Paul's speaking, he says that, that they were, when they're doing their pagan practices, that they're actually worshiping demons.
They're worshiping demons.
He says that specifically. In 106, it's kind of the degradation of Israel.
Yeah.
And it says that they eventually end up sacrificing their children to demon, which would be, Molech and Baal. There's, child sacrifice throughout this, dark pagan history. So how do we understand kind of the demonic along with the angelic as kind of a realm that influences
I think
things?
the way you opened it is a good way. Everywhere demon worship is found, it leads toward the destruction of human life.
Mm-hmm.
Often begins with animal life, but eventually ends up in the destruction of human life. In previous times, it was explicit idol worship, which were false gods, which are demons masquerading as smaller gods. They were able to manipulate these people. There's scriptural evidence that some of them may even control certain territories or people. So they have an influence.
Remind me, I want to get into that, the territory aspect.
And so that's the dark side of it. Those are the fallen angels. And they are, for whatever reason, loosed for a time in order to tempt man and in order to try to do evil. God will work good out of the evil that they do. In spite of, we don't have an absent God. So in spite of the devil's machinations and what his imps would do, God is going to work good even through that. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be on the lookout for them. And that doesn't mean that we should lean into temptation because they're there whispering in our ears or causing politicians to do X, Y, or Z like they caused pagan kings to do in older times. But on the flip side, you have the holy angels, which is probably ignored even more than demons because they're almost hokey. Every time you see an angel depicted, it's some silly little cherub or something like that, or something very effeminate. When we have warriors depicted, we have messengers too, but we also have warriors depicted like Michael in the scriptures. They're keeping watch over us. We have those in our prayers in the catechism, which are, holy angel be with me, that the evil foe may have no power over me. Well, what is that holy angel doing? We don't know specifically how it works, but we know that the holy angels are watching over us and protecting us. The spiritual world is a battle, and Scripture uses weaponistic terms for it. But what that actually looked like, we can't see it, but we know it does happen. It's one of those things that we accept by faith, and that's part of the nature of faith, holding on to that which is invisible, because God has said that it's true. And so the demons get all the movies, they get all the press, they get all the cool graphics, and angels get turned into very effeminate creatures or very childlike creatures. Or we turn angels into humans who have passed on or something like that. But they're ministering spirits who also fight a war, and a war on God, under God's command and on our behalf. And that's a marvelous reality to live in. A Christian knows that they're beset by temptations both from inside themselves and from without. And they also know then that they are not alone in that. We have the Word of God, we have the sacraments, and we have legions of holy angels who are working for us. Sometimes we become too rationalistic with that. Well, then when I failed, did my guardian angel fail? Was he taking a smoke break or whatever at that time? No, it's our fault when that happens. But there are myriad other times when an angel would be protecting us that we wouldn't know it. Just as, who knows, and maybe we'll know in the resurrection all these times that God protected us miraculously from things. And it's a strange thing to think about. I mean, it's pretty obvious why God doesn't show us this, because we would be anxious all the time if we saw the dangers that we were in.
So there's other biblical examples, specifically in the Old Testament, but I think we might be able to weave those in. So let's jump to some modern day kind of phenomenon that we can look at, either that there's document evidence of or experiential evidence of, and we'll kind of work through those. And I think then there's a lot of other biblical things that you can weave in. So you tell me what's a good place to start. Well, I'll give you two options. We can either do kind of the astral projection and some of the documents that surround that have been released that are quite interesting, or we could start with aliens, kind of leaning. Do you have a strong preference?
Let's start with astral projection.
Okay, that's what I was going to say too.
We might get stuck on aliens for a while.
And I think that makes much more sense when you're looking at
astral projection. Is the idea of one's soul or spirit being able to leave the body and go other places. Its kissing cousin that the government was involved in researching is remote viewing. So the difference being, in astral projection, your spirit leaves the body and goes somewhere. Remote viewing is you're sort of staying where you are, so to speak, and you can see far away. That's what the CIA, like with the Stargate project and other things, were trying to research. The official claim is that it was inconclusive, but there have been other tests on this, some within the margin of error of, this could have just been pure happenstance. But there was enough interest in it that our own government and perhaps other governments were interested in this kind of paranormal phenomenon. There was actually a time where major universities were researching things like extrasensory perception, which would include remote viewing, poltergeists, noisy ghost phenomenon, things like that. They were taking it very seriously at legitimate universities for a time. So there was probably a time where there was some more academic freedom than what we have today. You'd be laughed out of the room if you tried that today. But the CIA, for especially Cold War purposes, if we could just remote view what the commies were doing, we could figure out, we could beat them to the punch. And the government was apparently very willing to do this. But the government was involved in all kinds of stuff for a while. Mind control experiments. Disease experiments on unwitting subjects, for example. The mind control, like with MK Ultra, that's the really popular one. We're going to train killers that can be triggered at any point. And it was really a test of how to break down the mind to control it and make it do what you want. So people went through some pretty horrendous kind of experiments with this, with substances, with more physiological techniques in order to break them down. The powers that be were able to determine that you can actually break people down and remold them, which is a very scary thing. And then you have to ask the question as a Christian, okay, if we break down the mind, what does that do to the soul? Is the soul and body so separate that you can affect the mind without doing that? And people who have gone through these kinds of tortures really don't come out the same. And so then there's astral projection proper, which is, like I said, related to remote viewing. They're very similar in kind of what they try to do, but astral plane takes it a bit further and tries to go into other dimensions of existence. That's usually done through meditation, incantations, or taking other substances. It's a big part of Western esoterica. Well, it's a part of Western esoterica. Different schools of thought. Rosicrucianism had their version of it. Kind of this modern Egyptianism did it. Theosophy tried to do it. this idea of the soul escaping the body to achieve a higher form of existence or a more freer form of existence. So it's almost like the cliche of Greek thought, right? Where my soul needs to leave my body to be perfected. Well, this is now, I can transcend my body and go out of it and then go see whatever or do whatever. Inside of that discipline then would be the idea of things like lucid dreaming or things like meeting your spirit guide. Mm-hmm. And there are different ways people would do that, looking in mirrors, lighting candles through meditation. And people have done this, and some people get completely wrapped up in it. Some people are absolutely terrified of what they find, and some of them find the faith through that and repentance through that frightening experience. Mm-hmm. I think modern science would say this was a psychological trick, either induced by drugs or induced by an intense meditative state. But I don't think the Christian worldview can discount the supernatural or the demonic in this case. Because it could be that. I mean, drugs could mess with your brain chemistry and cause all sorts of things, but demons can also take advantage of that. It's part of the thing about being sober-minded in Christianity is because when we aren't sober-minded, we're less inhibited, more likely to do things we wouldn't do. It stands to reason that bad influences could get us to do things under the influence of transitive states or drugs or something like that. That shouldn't be a huge leap. I mean, you get a buddy drunk and you can make him sing any song at karaoke that you want. Mm-hmm. So that principle is pretty easy to prove. And if demons are real, they would take advantage of that as well. They're master observers. And so they have millennia of observation of the human condition. Mm-hmm. And so they can take advantage of a lot of things. Like historically, we don't believe that demons can see what's inside your head. We don't believe that they have knowledge of what's in your heart, or that they have necessarily perfect knowledge of the future, right? It's probably like a really good guess based on experience. Well, they see what you're doing. They see what your habits are. They see the subtle cues in your behavior, and they can exploit that.
I've seen this before.
Yeah. We've seen this a few times. We know what this guy's up to.
Yeah. So have you looked much at, because I've heard some fascinating claims that there were actually success in a lot of these programs.
There were, and it depends on who's interpreting the research and what you see. It certainly seems like in the case of remote viewing, they had some success. Mm-hmm. Things that couldn't otherwise be known. What they try to say is, well, the methodology was flawed. But I've never heard a good explanation for how the methodology was flawed. Mm-hmm. Something about the count and how they factored in the people who failed or something like that. Mm-hmm. There are other non-governmental studies, research studies that have shown some things. But the problem is you'll have a study or several studies that show promising things as far as this goes, and others that show it's completely false. It could be a case where this phenomenon is real, or a demon or whatever has gifted this person with this in exchange for whatever, and you don't know who to test. So in a random sample of 100, you might have 0. But if you find the right candidate, I mean, these are supposed to be exceptional gifts after all. Mm-hmm. Part of the reason behind the testing was, especially for the government, was, can this be taught? And so that's a question. Are these just gifts, quote unquote, that people might have, or is it something that can be learned? Mm-hmm. Kind of like how a witch might learn spells or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and in one of the kind of breakdowns that was making a strong argument that there was a lot of success in the remote viewing area. You know, they also would trace that it seems like a lot of money continued even after the Cold War being poured into this. And
that's kind of the smoking gun there. Like, if you think that they would have figured out within like day 3 that this was nothing, and it went on all the way up until the 90s. Mm-hmm. Why were they funding this?
Yeah.
Now, you could also say that, well, when a government program gets money, it never wants to give it up.
Yeah.
But in a lot of cases where something failed, like we only tried like cat-guided bombs in World War II once or something like that.
Yeah.
They didn't just keep pumping money into the cat bomb program. And so why keep funding money into this? And there are a lot of things that we'll just never know. Mm-hmm. Those things will remain classified, or they'll be shredded, and we'll never know. Mm-hmm. It could be a case where people find something and they realize this is too dangerous that this gets out. Mm-hmm. I mean, now we're kind of off into the fringes, but it's not beyond the realm of possibility.
Yeah. And because one of the other, and this is kind of what, circling back to, is that one of the other things that was brought up there is that there was a high a high level of multiple personality disorder.
Yes.
In those that were going through this.
Yeah.
Right.
And the schizophrenics had the edge in this.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm guessing you're going to go, okay, what's the relationship between schizophrenia and demonic possession?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. And we want to be careful here because we don't want to say that everybody who has a mental illness is necessarily demonically possessed.
Mm-hmm.
But there are very similar symptoms between demonic possession and certain mental illnesses. And multiple personality disorder, schizophrenia really looks like one of those things.
Mm-hmm.
You know? So can a demon mimic those symptoms, or is schizophrenia mimicking demonic possession somehow?
Mm-hmm.
Is it a little bit of both? Can we ever say that any illness is not in some sense motivated by sin? I mean, every illness is. It goes back to the fall. Yeah, the result of it. And so you look at a lot of times people will get into the occult, for example, or try to talk to demons, and they develop mental illnesses. The skeptic would say, well, they were already prone to that. They were already prone toward mental illness, and this just triggered it. Their interest in the paranormal triggered that. But we would see it the opposite way, that they're diving into something that God warns about. They're opening themselves up potentially to demonic attack or oppression or even possession,
mm-hmm.
playing with Ouija boards or diving into magic, real occult magic. We're not talking about card tricks here or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so by opening up the doorway, they then start exhibiting these symptoms that look like the modern definition of mental illness. But a lot of that is losing control of your faculties, but typically your mental faculties.
Mm-hmm.
So why can a demon not do that? We know from the scriptures that a demon afflicted a boy that he caused, it made him throw himself into fire, for example. There are physiological aspects to demonic possession. And so, or even the Gadarene demoniac, he's harming himself. He has apparently great strength. He's obsessed with death.
Mm.
These are things that we see in the occult and in people who practice magic.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this discussion is tempered because we can't talk about the occult or black magic or Satanism, like true occult Satanism, because the media invented a term called the Satanic Panic. And that term was invented as an eye roll at accusations of mass ritual abuse, particularly in the 1980s.
Hmm.
When we dig into that, there is more to a lot of there's more to a lot of these stories of ritual abuse. In one case, they said, "Oh no abuse happened here," but then the authorities went in and destroyed the places that would be investigated anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Some of it's silly. You go back and look at the fundamentalist videos of guys with He-Man toys saying, "Okay, this is clearly Satanism." That's usually what they're making fun of. But there was a tremendous amount of police reports at this time of ritual satanic abuse and witchcraft stuff going on. Now, this is anecdotal, but there's more than enough that we shouldn't just be ignoring it. And so they'll say it was a moral panic. But moral panics don't always happen quite so broadly. One of the things that colors this is a lot of stuff was done with repressed memory therapy. And they say that the kids who were abused or the people who were abused had the memories implanted by the psychotherapist. So that's not reliable. They're too suggestible in this state, and so they just made up these things. Or some of the things are so fantastical they couldn't possibly be true. But there could be a case of abuse where it's a child explaining it in the best way they can.
Mm-hmm.
Children do tend to exaggerate, but it doesn't really take away from the essence of the story, right?
Mm-hmm.
That something terrible happened to them, and it was somehow related to the occult. Because, some of these, you read them, in some of the cases, sounds impossible, but there could still be truth there.
Mm-hmm.
So the waters all get muddied, and yet you have case after case after case for a long time of supposed ritual abuse or animal mutilation or even human sacrifice. It's not just the cases of daycares or schools. I mean, there are cases of adults being murdered in ritualistic fashion. Brief History of Power did the episode on the Orthodox priest who was murdered in an apparent ritual murder. It's always out in California. There was a murder at Stanford, for example. Everything looked ritualistic as far as that goes. And we're always told, well, that's just a one-off. Okay, well, let's say it is a one-off. That's still one example of someone into the occult or into demonology who is doing it on behalf of his religious beliefs. So it's out there somewhere. Mm-hmm. Most of the time, the kind of abuse won't be so bold like that. You're not going to desecrate an altar, put a body up, those sorts of things. And yet, what do you have that, pardon me.
AI's got something to say about
AI
this.
heard me. Oh, that's funny.
What is it?
It's talking about Ed and Lorraine Warren, the famous parapsychologists.
Oh, really?
That was, yeah. I'll forget you got a camera. So yeah, that was my phone talking now. So they thought we were talking about The Conjuring or something like that. So,
interesting. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of famous parapsychologists from that era. Anyway, so where was I with this? Before Google interrupted me.
Yeah, well, I mean, you do have examples of this. They're not always so grandiose.
Yeah,
but there are
a lot of
trends.
examples are things like cats being mutilated and laid out. And that usually gets ascribed to rowdy teens.
Mm-hmm.
I was a teenager a long time ago, and I never once thought about mutilating a cat and making it look like the devil did it. Yeah. I don't know what you were doing in Indiana or Michigan.
Rowdy, but not that.
Yeah, not that rowdy, you know. And so there's a lot of things out there that we don't talk about because it's uncomfortable. I think confronting the reality of it is too hard.
Mm-hmm.
There's also this air of respectability that a lot of modern Christians crave, so that if we talk about this, we look crazy. We look like we're the crazy ones, and we want to be erudite and respectable in the eyes of the world. Who cares? If the devil is causing people to kill cats, we should probably speak out against that. Mm-hmm. If he's causing people to kill humans, we should definitely speak out against that. And we know from Scripture that he does cause people to kill humans in the form of human sacrifice and in the form of murder.
Mm-hmm.
So it happens. Even outside of a ritualistic context, the devil and his angels will influence people to do horrible things.
Mm-hmm.
And so we don't practice ritualistic, per se, child sacrifice today, but we sacrifice children every day in this country for the sake of convenience or for the sake of my own will and my own life through abortion. That's satanic, even though it's very secularly framed.
Mm-hmm.
It is 100% demonic to just wholesale destroy children.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we allow that.
Mm-hmm.
We allow that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like, once you kind of zoom out, right? So you zoom in and zoom out, I feel like, on the subject. Like there's tangible things you look at and you go like, well, that's interesting that the CIA is looking into that.
Right.
That's interesting that we see this kind of trend in a non-Christian type modern spiritualism, right? That ends up becoming really dark, and often you see kind of atrocities. But then when you zoom back out, we had John D. Davidson on, and he kind of does a great job of walking through. He goes through some of the archaeological things we know about the Vikings. He goes through the modern kingdom of Benin, which is, I think, at like the turn of the 19th century in Western Africa, I believe. He goes through, of course, the Aztecs and the Incas, with the Aztecs being the most grandiose. You can go back to Carthage, right? So in other words, you can go across the sphere.
Yeah, reminder, the Aztecs and Incas, not that long ago.
Yeah, when were they?
I mean, Spain,
1700s?
Yeah, I mean, Spain shows up in the late 1400s, early 1500s, and starts eradicating that.
Yeah.
And that's one of the interesting things. That's, one of my favorite from that era is the Spanish said, yeah, they were making pyramids out of human skulls. And for years, oh no, that was just Spanish propaganda. And then a couple years ago, we found it.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, the human sacrifices must stop.
There's this, Brody was telling me, Daniel Broadus was telling me about this, but, there's these letters that Cortez wrote back to Spain. And, he wrote them at the time, and eventually they got sent off. And he was documenting that he literally thought that they had died on the voyage and that they had landed in hell.
Yeah.
Like that's how grotesque it was as they were entering into these villages. Of things like you talked about. I mean, other things I won't even say here, but it was just
anthropologically, we're not allowed to say that, right? But because that becomes a value judgment.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And they're supposed to be the bad guys now. So we're not allowed to defend conquistadors for any reason.
Yeah.
And it's, but Christians can make value judgments. God makes value judgments all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Some cultural practices need to stop. Okay. So like Hindus burning their widows on top of their husbands. We stopped that.
Mm-hmm.
It should have stopped, and we shouldn't apologize for that. Well, we can't hurt their culture. That's their culture. No, God changes cultures. And wherever Christianity rolls in, life should be affirmed.
Mm-hmm.
Now that gets a little tricky when part of the conquest of the Aztecs and the Incas was war, but it's also war that liberated a whole class of other tribes from being thrown into volcanoes and worse.
And and one of the themes as you kind of look at that is certainly there's always an understanding of gods, right? You know, kind of this paganism. There's always an understanding of there's kind of an exchange, right? That if you can do these grotesque things, and the more grotesque they are, there's this assumption that you're going to receive something in return. Yeah. And you know, usually I feel like it's kind of painted in this brush of, you know, how could they be so naive? But it's like, well, these are usually not, I mean, they sometimes can be, but they're usually not just like backwoods type tribes. And it does happen in tribes in, you know, Sahara Africa and whatnot. But
the Mayans, the Aztecs are fairly, I mean, they're not advanced by European standards, but they build giant cities.
They're advanced in their areas. Yeah. You know, Carthage was, you know, economically wildly advanced.
Right. Well, I mean, let's look at Rome. We all love Rome, but they're a vast pagan empire, extraordinarily advanced for their time. Mm-hmm. And they're doing much the same thing. I'll kill this perfect lamb for you if you give me this. I'll kill 6 pigeons if I can get this.
Mm-hmm. And one of the two trends, and then I want to kind of hear you speak on this. So Davidson broke this down in his book. But if you go, there seems to be an age range of around, I think it's 4 to 7, to where, so for instance, when there was a long period of time where the idea that the Vikings did human sacrifice was kind of denied for a period. So it was kind of accepted for a while, and then they, you know, the narrative started to shift, and you know, because there was the framing of Christians and Vikings.
Right.
Now we had to take the side of the Vikings for the same reason you were just mentioning. So at that time, they're like, well, I don't think the Vikings actually did. There's no evidence. And then they came across 3 different, like, strong evidences for sacrifice, for mass sacrifice, and then for very, very detailed, systematic, sacrifice. And it had to do with kind of mixing animals and humans, but it also seemed to, they found like this mass grave, and it was like all kids age 4 to 7 that seemed like they were killed in a very systematic kind of sacrificial way. Right. So that's the one, why that seems to be part of those nations that give themselves up to demonic worship, who are usually very wealthy and successful, and for some reason believe they're receiving something in return. You know, that seems to be one focus, but then also that the blood seems to be something that they think is of value to demons. I don't know if you can speak on those two.
Well, life is in the blood. That's from the Bible, right? They're doing what demons do. They take something that is sacred. I remember the Jerusalem Council says we're not to eat blood or drink blood. So there is something
which is a New Testament. I mean, that's
that's in the New Testament
with Peter and Paul.
Some would accuse it of being Judaizing, but it's in Acts. So there is something sacred about, especially human blood. In the case of Acts, it's even animal blood. The life is in the blood, whatever that principle shakes out as. And so the demons are going to pervert whatever that is. So if God says this is something important, they're going to try to take that. So we are supposed to have faith in God above all things. They will tempt you to put faith in money, power, prestige, whatever. That's another version of that. It's a more insidious and obvious version of that. Why is it often children? I think it's because they want to destroy what's pure. Mm-hmm. Now, we got to be careful theologically, right? Original sin and all of that. But children do have an innocence in a way, at least relatively speaking, compared to adults. Mm-hmm. And so they want to corrupt them before anything else can, ultimately, and sometimes to the point of their life. I really do think it's that dark. I think it's that serious. Mm-hmm. It's, we talk about not letting kids be kids in our day, but they wouldn't let them live very long into childhood in those days if they were the wrong kids. And a lot of times they're sacrificing the children of other tribes. So I guess you could say they're just trying to stop the tribe from growing. But that's the human concern. A demon really doesn't care. Mm-hmm. Demon doesn't care which tribe is which so much, insofar as both are worshiping some demon somewhere. I mean, I guess demons could get jealous of other demons, but they want to destroy that which is particularly wholesome and sacred. I mean, Jesus has very strong words for those who would harm a little one. Mm-hmm. And so it all really comes back together if we'll just let those pieces connect. But sometimes the horror of it is too much. We don't want to talk about it. So we relegate talk about this stuff to just movies or once a year around Halloween when it seems seasonally appropriate.
Mm-hmm.
But we live in a very weak kind of time. We're simultaneously desensitized, but also scared of the reality of life and death. And so we're desensitized through movies and even what amount to snuff films. You can get cartel killing videos and everything. So we're desensitized in a way, but we don't want to talk about the ramifications of that. Why do we recoil from gore and from murder and things like that? It's because of what's being harmed. We naturally have an aversion to that. I think that if the law of God is written on our hearts, then of course it's naturally repugnant to see life taken.
Mm-hmm.
Thou shalt not kill. And yet we see it indiscriminately happen, both in entertainment and in real videos sometimes nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
But we live in a weak period because in the West, at least for now, we are insulated from a lot of the world's violence. We don't have that all the time. Now, in certain cities, you have it more often, but not like what we see in other parts of the world, and certainly not like what we saw in times past. And we don't even have to go to the pagans. I mean, you take even World War II, World War I. I mean, think about how World War I changed the world. You read the diaries of those men before they went into World War I, and then read them afterwards. It's a completely different world now. You go back to the Reformation era with the wars we were fighting there, even on European soil, because we've been talking so much about South America, in this episode, but look at how much bloodshed was happening, even during the Reformation,
mm-hmm.
and go back at any time period. Relatively peaceful as far as where we live. And so we're insulated from that. And yet because of media, we have access to a tremendous amount of violence, and it creates this very strange juxtaposition within our minds
mm-hmm.
on what to do with violence. And couple that with the fact that we're increasingly insular and inwardly focused, that we don't really care about what happens in our communities in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that's part of a demonic plot too. We don't really care what happens to our neighbor across the street. Some don't even care what happens to those who live in the same house that they do. So we can't even fathom what it would be like for a Viking tribe to come in and wipe out your whole people.
Mm-hmm.
We can theoretically get it there, but never having experienced anything close to that, it's very hard for us to understand. And because it's hard to understand, it's hard for us to care. And so then this doesn't happen to me. Why should I worry about demonic influence anywhere?
Mm-hmm.
Because it all becomes theoretical.
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of the overarching theme, and we can use that as kind of a jumping point for other things, is that, certainly Satan's desire is to undo the good that God has done.
Yeah.
Which is the beauty of creation. It's, of course, the beauty of that which God has made in his own image. And so Satan's desire is to attack and destroy. Now, it doesn't seem like Satan can show up in this room with a sword and slice us down. Like, it doesn't seem like he's got that kind of realm. So the way he has to work...
Unless you're Job.
Yeah.
He does get special permission.
Yeah, that's very true. Yeah.
But he can't kill Job.
Yeah.
But he can kill some other people in the process and a lot of cattle.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. So outside of that one...
But he can influence people to do it.
Yeah, and that's usually the route that he does,
that is,
right?
Yeah.
And so there...
Well, I mean, even in Job, it's like a wall falling, it's this or that, or
right.
pestilence or something like
that. So there's this... So he wants to destroy, he's got to do it but through, for the most part, the influence of the created realm, usually through humans. And so how is it that he gains control? So that's where it seems like that's where the pagan worship comes in,
yes.
or the breaking of the first commandment, right?
Yeah.
And it's that if you are worshiping God, then you are underneath his protection, right? And for us, bring your sacramental understanding and,
right.
Being protected by, the walls of being part of the community of the church and whatnot. But the way that Satan gains control is if he's able to put carrots in front of you to get you to do things that in turn makes you worship him.
Yeah. It's almost an inversion of the sacramental reality.
Yeah. And as a quick caveat, it's not as if I'm walking home and like Satan can just dangle something small and it's like, boom, now he's got me. Right. But there is this sense that he's got to like woo you, and he can woo not only you, but he can woo communities into doing things that are obviously in service of him. And that's the way that he is going to work about his plan.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that's the wooing communities is what's so strange to us, because again, we think so in terms of the individual that we're looking so much at ourselves or somebody else that we don't see what happens to a whole nation.
Mm-hmm.
or a whole city, a whole tribe, depending on the context.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, if you think about it like in modern day terms, right, even just to take the historical out, there are so many things that we're dealing with today that are kind of categorized underneath politics, right? You can think of the A word that you've already mentioned. I try not to say the word because I've got pretty good data that YouTube
demonetizes.
Not just demonetizes, but we don't make much money off YouTube anyway. But
whoops! Well, I just killed that episode.
Yeah. Well, no, I think our views actually go down.
Yeah.
If it's mentioned, so I think YouTube actually can just read the transcript through AI and kind of kill that. But either way, I mean, it's been mentioned a handful of times anyway. But that A word, the termination of your offspring, whatever, like you've got that. You've got all of the, trying to think of the right word, so I don't use the trigger word here, but the cutting off of your body parts, right? That are going on. Like these things are, they're not political. Like those are not political discussions. Right. Like political discussions are, like what do we do with traffic laws?
Right. Sound monetary policy.
Yeah, sound monetary policy. Do we take Austrian economics? Do we do tariffs? Do we not do tariffs? Like those are political discussions. Like those are. Like the notion of those types of things are the only explanation a Christian can give is like those are demonic.
Yeah. Well, politicians have become our priests. It's become our priestly class where we offer up to them our devotion and our votes and our taxes, hoping that they will do our bidding because of our sacrifices. Taxes, even though involuntary, are a sacrifice, right? So we pull the lever for them. Oh, please do this. Now, part of that's just the normal democratic process, whereby we have to vote, we have to participate because we need to be responsible citizens. But for a large part of the country, and that's any country with any kind of democracy, those elected officials become the ones in which they put their hope. What's finally going to fix things? Is it turning to God and repenting? No, it's pulling the lever for this politician for the 6th term. So it's ritualistic in a way.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so so that seems like the way. This can move to kind of a question here, but it seems like one of the ways that Satan works is he might work on you individually so that he can work on the community, but then he can also kind of seep things and ideologies and absolutely wicked practices and normalize them into a community.
And one of the ways he does that is, so if the sacramental reality that we live in is that God would fill us with himself, okay, or feed us on his body and blood, Satan would like to fill us with garbage, but he would also want us to empty ourselves of everything, leaving ourselves open for him. So we practice things we shouldn't that open ourselves up to his influence, be that drugs or magic or giving into anger all the time. So we're emptying of ourselves of that which we need to be full of, like the good, right? The grace that God would give us. And he kind of creates that vacuum and then rushes in to satisfy that, satisfy that emptiness. And you see this in politics and you see it in entertainment. People are empty. People don't have a lot to live for. And I think that's a large societal problem. That comes in part from us lacking community, lacking family. So they try to fill that. And so that gap can be filled with political activism. It can be filled with junk food, like entertainment and consuming media. It doesn't have to be open pagan worship. It's just whatever takes your eyes off of the cross, whatever takes your eyes off of God. And so he empties you of the desire to do that, creates a hunger in you, and shows you another way that you can fill that hunger.
That does get to the notion of, another point that Davidson made is that atheism, it's impossible for atheism to live long. Right. And the whole point is, what's one of the great protective units for Christianity? And it's like the life being built on thankfulness, or like keeping that awe and wonder at God's goodness. Yeah. Because that fills you up.
And I would argue, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, it empties you of that wonder. It empties you of understanding those blessings. So to your point, you have to be empty first before you can become infatuated with things outside of the order of goodness, truth,
and back to that word wonder again. It's a marvel of God that we have adequate food, or that he causes the rains to fall, or the sun to come up, or the earth to keep rotating on its axis, if you believe that sort of thing. And we forget that because everything's been explained away through everything. We know the mechanisms of how God does it now. And then we've forgotten that it's God who makes this happen.
So what about, I wanted to ask you about this, and this kind of gets into what we're talking about. So when we think of demons, we usually think of like a demon in me, right? Like there's kind of this one-on-one. And we're certainly told, and we should have a lot of confidence in this, that, the Christian who's under Christ has authority over a demon because Christ has authority over that demon.
Yeah.
Is there kind of a category of, like, I've heard different terms for this, right? But kind of like a territorial demon.
Yeah, I think the scripture backs that up. Prince of Persia. Then we've got, we don't wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the principalities in the heavenly places, those sorts of things. That's the Sedes Doctrina for territorial spirits.
Mm-hmm.
There are these principalities. I think people read that today and think, okay, that's referring to earthly government. No, in context, it's referring to the spiritual realm. And it certainly seems as if, when you look at scripture and look at the history of interpretation, and that's including Lutheran interpretation historically, that there are, however it works, spirits over certain territories. And I guess we could use reason, legions, that's a military kind of term that would be organized.
Mm-hmm.
Not just legions, we are many, but like legions of angels and things like that.
Yeah.
So they would be organized. The church has, via tradition, established that angels work that way. So it stands to reason that demons could too. And they wouldn't be very good if they weren't organized. And hierarchy is part of organization.
Mm-hmm.
And so now does that mean that there's a demon over Minnesota or multiple demons? Maybe it's broken up into like electoral districts or something like that. We don't know exactly how that happens.
Yeah.
But it certainly seems that way.
Mm-hmm.
Christians have long held, kind of in the case of hauntings related to demons, that certain spirits, evil spirits, can occupy a home or occupy an object. Like things can become cursed. Now they're infected with demons or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Nowadays that's looked upon as superstition, but there's a long Christian tradition of locating where demons are.
Mm-hmm.
And so if they can be in a home, they can certainly be in a city and have a great influence over that, or even over a nation.
Mm-hmm.
I think the danger is when we try to name those things. There's also a history of that with the grimoires and everything, trying to name, this is the demon of this is the demon of that. Even some respected Catholic exorcists have names for demons for everything. That's a little dangerous. Now, I'm not the expert like they are, but it seems too curious for me. Well, once you name them, you have power over them. Let's settle down there.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say it's a demon. Let's figure out how to get rid of it. This isn't a disease that we need to diagnose and give it a name so we can give it the proper treatment. It's a demon.
Mm-hmm.
And so you can go a little bit too far into demonology, beyond curiosity or healthy research, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I'm wrong on that, but to try to say, okay, what's this demon's name so I know how to tackle him better?
Mm-hmm.
How about just the name of Jesus and whatever else works?
Yeah.
Beyond that.
And isn't there a notion where, like, and once again, I don't know what these people are, but these Catholic exorcists and stuff that's kind of what they do. But I mean, there is a notion that I don't know about this whole name thing, but that there are certain forms of evil.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like there seems to be a demonic influence in sexuality. There seems to be a demonic influence in like hyperusury or things like this,
Mm-hmm.
right? There are kind of elements of evil that continually
That's why some of like the demon names are not just, and I won't say any of their, weird names, but sometimes they'll say, this is the demon of greed in the case of usury, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the demon of lust in the case of lust. They'll name the demon after the sin. So they have a demon that is causing them to commit this specific sin. So that's the name that the demon gets. That's a little bit different than some of the other things I was talking about.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
But you kind of have that, in the Bible, like this person had a spirit of X, right? And that's kind of that idea.
Mm-hmm. Okay, that makes sense.
Spirit of anger or something like that.
Yeah. So what do we do with that as a church then, with this aspect of, because I think normally we think of it kind of this personal demon or something like that, but what do you do with if there's a kind of a territorial aspect there?
Yeah, and I think that those are still personal, but they've just maybe got a bigger jurisdiction, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you're talking about personal in the sense of attached to one person, like in the case of possession or oppression.
Yeah.
What do we do? Well, let's take it like with the house, okay? So our standard protocol, if there's a haunting, as you know, is a house blessing.
Mm-hmm.
So
we have in our pastoral care companion.
So we just go about sanctifying the house with the word of God and prayer.
Mm-hmm.
there's nothing that says that you can't do the same thing for your community, for your streets, ostensibly for your nation. Mm-hmm. The mechanics of it might be tricky, but we do a form of that every week when we pray for good government, when we pray for our nation and for its citizens. That's part of that. It's exorcistic in a way. Mm-hmm. It is pleading to God for a blessing upon our nation. And heavily implied in that is to rout out all evil forces. Mm-hmm. But in our minds today, we tend to think of that in purely political terms sometimes. That's why it's hard to pray the prayers each week sometimes, because anytime you pray for your nation's leaders, people think that that's a prayer of support.
Yes.
And it depends on where we are in the election cycle, how happy they are with that.
Yeah.
But it's also a prayer to drive Satan from our borders.
So there's something to the National Day of Prayer in that aspect.
I mean, why wouldn't you always be lifting up your nation, your people?
Mm-hmm. And there's something good about Christians uniting around that.
Yeah. And maybe that's part of it, too, to kind of go back to the community aspect of it. We don't have an aspect of community. We've long since jettisoned in the West the idea of a nation being a people. Mm-hmm. And so as we get rid of that, a nation becomes purely a political or business model rather than a collection of the people.
Mm-hmm. So how does all of this connect with aliens?
Well, everything connects to aliens.
Yeah.
Let's talk about aliens. A little lighter fare. So aliens are, we're talking about space aliens here, not the ones Tom Homan's looking for right now, right?
Wait,
like,
what's Tom looking for? Bennett's over there laughing. You got
Bennett gets the joke. The people at home will get the joke. It's our ice guy.
Someone's got to explain it to me now.
Yeah. We're talking about illegal immigrants.
Oh,
Brian.
yes. Okay.
They're called aliens again. No, so we're talking about.
Did you hear Shane Gillis's joke?
I didn't know.
He's like, it was when he was doing the ESPYs.
Yeah.
So he's up there and he's like, so I just have to say, like, Tucker Carlson wanted me to tell a joke. I think he'd just given a joke about aliens. He's like, Tucker Carlson wanted me to give a joke about aliens, and so did Donald Trump, but for different reasons.
So the extraterrestrials. So I've done way back, some deep dives on this on Word Fitly Spoken. I've done it on B-Hop as well. If you go back and look at the hard data on supposed alien abductions, charitably saying that some of these are hallucinations or mental illnesses or whatever, there's an alarming degree of similarity between them. Then if you go back in history and look at reported demonic afflictions, you find great similarities there. And so there's a couple ways to look at it. The Christian way, which would be that aliens are demons masquerading as people from outer space, or something like that. You have Jacques Vallée in Passport to Waconia, who posits the theory. It's a very helpful book to read just for all the data there. But the conclusion is essentially that ancient cultures encountered space aliens and interpreted them as demons. So it's the reverse of what we would do. We would say, we're encountering aliens now, they're just the demons of old. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people will just go with, oh, it's just fake. Mm-hmm. And the UFO community, or UAP, whatever I'm supposed to call them today, they get very uncomfortable, kind of like the Bigfoot community does, if you bring the supernatural into it. Because for them, it's very much a scientific thing. It's a question of government technologies not yet declassified. It's a question of true outer space visitors. One of my favorite books on this is Father Seraphim Rose, Orthodoxy and the Religion of the Future. And he writes extensively about UFOs and that. And he sort of foretells a future where the world will get so bad that people will be looking for a savior and it will come from outer space. And I think interpreting what he saw in the late 70s and early 80s, very early 80s, was on the money, because that's where everything was going. And I remember hearing a talk that he did. He's long since passed. E.T. the Extraterrestrial. That movie was big at the time. Mm-hmm. And he was just excoriating the Greek Orthodox Archdiocese newspaper for saying that this was a good movie. Because he's like, this thing is obviously a demon. It's a freak. And they're teaching it that it's your friend and it's your savior. Avoid this. And people got so mad when he said that. And I've talked to a man who was actually there when he gave that speech. And he's like, yeah, people got really mad when he came after E.T. But then you think back to it, the man's got a point. So you look at kind of what happened with UFO culture. We did end up with UFO based religions. the Pleiadians and things like that. We ended up with a very notable mass suicide with the Heaven's Gate cult, which is an alien cult. They wanted to ride the tail of a comet, so they killed themselves, among other things. And so there's a couple of examples there. You have people who now believe that aliens come and talk to them and give them divine revelations, and they call them aliens. It's like the song Styx did, Come Sail Away, where he thinks he's seeing angels, and then the twist at the end of the song is that he climbs aboard their starship and headed toward the sky. So they think that the aliens are coming, and that the aliens are what the angels were in the past. The divine messengers were always these highly advanced, sentient, intelligent beings. Today, though, there's a twist to this, and I wonder what Seraphim Rose would say if he was here, because I think the narrative is shifting a little bit without getting into the history of UFO investigations, the appearance of gray aliens, how they look a whole lot like the demon Aleister Crowley claimed to meet named Lamb. It looks almost like the gray-headed aliens that we see. Anyway, but now the discussion has moved over into interdimensional beings. So 6 and 1/2 a dozen the other. Now they're not from outer space, but now the theory is people are talking to beings from other dimensions, which gets us back to the astral plane and astral projection. What do you meet in the spirit plane? These weird creatures. It's another dimension. They might call it a spiritual plane, but that's another dimension in modern scientific talk. So now people will say, we're going to talk to these interdimensional beings, and they're going to give us stuff. That's the famous Tucker Carlson. I think it was Rogan, right? That Tucker Carlson was on, and he mentioned
I watched that. Yeah.
And I can't remember if he couched that as interdimensional or couched it as aliens, but talking to basically demons. I mean, he was pretty open about that.
So when we had John D. Davidson on, he had just been on. They released Tucker like 3 days before we released the episode with him, or maybe no, it was right before he came on, and it was almost all on these aliens. And John's like, he's kind of like, dang it, like, I'm on Tucker's, and Tucker's just forcing him in to talk about aliens. And his book's not about. I mean, I think he mentions it maybe like in a couple pages on a book, but he's like, that's not what the book's about. So it's kind of funny. Tucker was on this kick for a little while,
and I think that's the way the narrative is shifting on that. But now we're getting closer to what it probably is, which is demons. It's either hallucinations, hoaxes, or very likely demons. If it's true that high-ranking people in the world are talking to these things, these are not space aliens. The space alien idea comes from this idea that we're arrogant if we think we're alone in the universe, and maybe we are. But the earth is also unique, and Christianity values the creation of man over anything else.
And the biblical story is told to us. It's not telling. I mean, like if there are other creatures within,
and if you take a biblical cosmology, you have a firmament, and it doesn't seem like anything can go beyond it. And can a spirit come through it? Then it's not a space alien at that point. But so you get to the interdimensional thing, and then that gets you into. I feel like it's a Rogan episode, because then that gets you into DMT, LSD, mushrooms, hallucinogenic drugs.
Which I do want to talk about too. So,
well, it's all related.
Yeah.
So when we go from aliens to LSD really, really quick, you go aliens, interdimensional beings, and now or astral projection at the beginning. Now we're going to take a drug that gives us a hyperdrive into a realm that we're not meant to be in. So we have these hallucinations. And a lot of times with these drugs, the hallucinations between individuals are very similar. Sometimes they're very tailor-made. Sometimes they're very unique to that person. Other times they're very similar to what other people see. And that's what's fascinating.
Yeah.
If multiple people are seeing the same things when they access whatever these drugs give them, then we have something to talk about here. Terrence McKenna's fractal elves, the elves that people see when they take these things.
Yeah.
Hallucinogens are a different class of drugs, and they do mess with the brain chemistry. But we don't know the relationship between brain chemistry and the soul either. So is it just a trick of the chemistry, or is there something else going on there? And when people say, well, I took this, for every person that says, I took this drug and it absolutely changed my life and made me better, there's a whole lot of other people who get one-shotted by it and completely lose their minds. And we don't really talk about that. Hallucinogens, more than other drugs, they have a stigma about them because of the 60s. But the history of them, particularly something like LSD, is really quite interesting. First synthesized by Albert Hoffman. I think he accidentally doses himself with it when he figures out what it is. And it's a naturally occurring agent that does this. So then he voluntarily takes it and goes on a really long exploratory trip. And early on, LSD, and I think also mushrooms as well, but definitely LSD, were actually very successful when they were used in moderation to treat addictions.
Mm-hmm.
They were making great strides with alcoholism like in the 50s and before with LSD. So there might actually be a therapeutic use for it and for PTSD and things like that. I know that might be controversial.
They're doing that with ketamine now.
They're doing that with ketamine, which that's a whole other thing.
Yeah.
Ketamine's very different because I don't know that ketamine, and I'm not a drug expert, is a classic hallucinogen, like a naturally occurring one, like LSD can be, or mushrooms or something like that. So people can take low-dose mushrooms and overcome certain things. It gets a little bit tricky ethically for me when it's to help people who are dying, to have strength when dying. I think as Christians, we have other remedies for that that we should go to. But LSD in particular and mushrooms were stigmatized because of the counterculture. They began to use LSD. Magic mushrooms were kind of rediscovered. And so they got a really bad rap, whether right or wrong, because of the overuse by the counterculture. Where before they were really heavily regulated as far as how they were dosed. It was also very easy to get. But once the counterculture got involved in it, it got turned into a controlled substance really, really quick. But now people are starting to experiment with these things therapeutically again and recreationally again. We're seeing a big uptick in the recreational use of hallucinogens. So you get college kids who go down to Peru and take ayahuasca, like an indigenous version of this kind of thing. And they're claiming to have spiritual experiences. On the one hand, you can say this is just an illusion, a trick of the brain. On the other hand, we can absolutely say they're having spiritual experiences. The question is, are these healthy spiritual experiences? Or are they tapping into something that they shouldn't?
And the devil masquerades as an angel of light. And that's where when I hear, some popular people that'll talk about that, they'll talk about it in the positive sense. I mean, like you said, for as many positive experiences, I can tell you a lot of negative experiences of people I know that have, had horrific experiences that scare them. But either way, it seems like if I were strategizing as a demon, like if I were a screw tape letter, type approach, it would make sense to, if you've got people, especially people that are not Christian, right, and are very fascinated in this whole realm. Like, what's your first move with someone like that? It's not to scare them. I mean, if you scare the crap out of them, like, they're probably likely to go to Christianity or completely leave that type of vehicle. But if you can entice them and try to give them a good experience, then you can keep keep them in that loop, and then you can steer them towards something. Yeah,
a more perhaps controversial take on this is our cultural use of alcohol. Obviously, you and I have no issue with partaking in alcohol. Everything in moderation. But in certain regions, it's a point of pride how much alcohol you can drink, how much you can abuse. And alcohol does destroy your inhibitions. And so there have been a lot of things that have happened because people drank too much when they shouldn't have. The devil can take control of that. And anytime we do something that causes us to lose, especially when we binge drink, things like that, lose absolute control of our faculties, it's so much easier to be suggested by anybody to do something. So then you take something that hijacks the brain in a different way than alcohol does, because alcohol does that. But that's why
they used to call it spirits.
You're right.
They still do. I mean,
they still do in a much more vivid way. Then there is a danger there. And so as the discourse is changing on hallucinogenic drugs, because of, I keep saying hallucinogenic. I mean to say psychedelic. The classic psychedelic drugs is what I meant to say. On psychedelics, that's the proper word. You can go back and edit that back. But anyway, then there might be legitimate therapeutic uses. Maybe. Not a doctor. But then you have the rise of the recreational use of it. And so then you have people who are talking to interdimensional beings of some sort, whether they believe those are true spirits or they're just an illusion. You have people who are claiming angels are visiting them. You have people who are, through other means, claiming to talk to interdimensional beings. We're actually really close to what Seraphim Rose is talking about. We're getting into an era where religion is on the rise, but interest in different religions is on the rise. So old paganism, new paganism, we're in like a new age religion sort of movement right now. we're kind of primed for that. Couple that with the transhumanist movement, which seeks to exceed the bonds of what humans could traditionally do and can naturally do, then we do have a recipe for kind of a terrifying world religion that could come out of this.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe we don't end up worshiping the interdimensional beings. Maybe they teach us how to worship ourselves as everlasting gods, or so we think everlasting, which sounds really crazy when you say it out loud, as you nod in agreement. But what are we trying to do? What is the goal of the transhumanist movement? To destroy death, to destroy the curse of the fall. It can't be done. It can only be a facsimile. So right now they talk about, well, we can take your memories theoretically and download them and you'll live forever. That's not you. That's not an ensouled being. It's not a human. It's a copy of a human. It's a clone. It's like a digital clone. And so we have all these things that we're just brushing up against that we shouldn't be. We're talking to things that we shouldn't be, taking things we shouldn't be. And so in simpler times, it was the UFOs. And now that same spirit of talking to the aliens has turned into talking to all of these other things. And it's so much like what we used to do in the pagan times.
Yeah.
Or we really did throughout all of history. Try and talk to spirits, try and talk to demons. Because the spirits and the demons, they always have greater wisdom than we do. So then contextualize that into the 60s, 70s, 80s. The aliens have more wisdom than we do. The interdimensional beings know more than we do. They've transcended the body. They can go through different dimensions.
And I mean, you know, the Aztecs, for instance, like they would take hallucinogens. I don't know if it was ayahuasca, but it would geographically make sense. And they would take the priests would take those,
right?
Whenever they were doing the sacrifices.
Yes.
So the idea was we're making these sacrifices, and now we take these drugs, and because we made these sacrifices, now these demonic, or you know, whatever they call the gods, or Aztecs might have even recognized them as demonic beings. Who knows? They're so twisted. You know, they're going to then communicate with us. Then we're going to receive information, and that information is going to be valuable to us as an empire. You know, and I mean, I want to push back, or not push back, but go back to what you were talking about, because this is one of those areas that I think makes me most interested in a negative sense, and that is that you'll have stories of people that take hallucinogens and they'll say, you know, I was speaking, but you also get a lot of these examples to where, especially when it's choreographed in a certain way, where you can get groups of 20 people, and the 20 people will take the drug, you know, LSD, DMT, whatever it is. And, you know, then they'll all describe these elves or some kind of thing coming out of the forest and coming and speaking to all of them. And they all have this exact same shared experience.
Yeah.
Now that seems much more in line with this notion of you're not just talking with your own brain, you are actually accessing something that is probably quite dangerous. As you said, we're not designed. God doesn't bring us into that sphere. Well, God sometimes brings us into interesting spheres, with the example of like Ezekiel and whatnot.
Right.
But God is the one that's doing it. It's not us doing it on our own. And then one more thing, and I'll let you go. But there's a lot of reports that in Silicon Valley, for instance, that they do these same kind of things, where they will have a lot of these events where people come and they take these as a group psychedelics, and then they receive information. Which, I mean, that's the cornerstone of all of the technological AI type transhumanist, you know, things that are going on. So if you kind of plug all these together, it does kind of make sense that these groups of people, historically speaking, with the Aztecs, there's interesting reports out of even Germany during the Nazi time. I think, I'm not as positive, but I think even in Russia during the Soviet Union, there were some reports of that. And then if you plug in Silicon Valley, it seems like there's this theme throughout history.
Well, and American intelligence being involved with these too.
And American intelligence, yeah.
That's actually how it got brought to the counterculture. Depending on how you look at it, either guys like Bear Stanley, from the audio engineer for the Grateful Dead, like the most prolific and, by all accounts, best producer of LSD of his time.
Yeah.
And Ken Kesey wrote the Electric Kool-Aid acid test. These men were all allegedly involved in the CIA experiments. But when I say CIA experiments, I think people think it's like Slugworth and Willy Wonka, like in a dark alley, like, psst, hey kid. No, they just had a sign up like drug experiment on the campus. Want to come try it? What's most likely is they smuggled the drug out. They had a really good time with it and smuggled it out. Some people think that, no, they were intentionally told to leak this. And so that birthed the counterculture movement, but that also birthed Silicon Valley and everything. It's all related. It's all California somewhere.
Yeah. So what do you take of if you kind of synthesize some of these data points? Like what does that kind of teach you about the realm of spirituality?
Well, much like demonic experiences in previous times, looking like UFO experiences today, it shows us that history repeats itself. There's nothing new under the sun. So the pagan priests in ancient times or even early modern times were doing these things. And now we have just rediscovered them, sometimes in a different form, sometimes in the very same form. One of the things that seems to annoy the American indigenous, the Native Americans who use peyote, is the fact that like white college kids are trying to take their peyote because they treat it as very sacred, and then it's being used recreationally. But these things have all been rediscovered. So once again, here we are going back toward things that our society learned in the past we shouldn't really be playing with. And here we're doing it again. But with every generation, especially as technology progresses, it seems the severity of this can get worse from a spiritual perspective. I think that the defense of psychedelics would be, no, now we can control them more in a lab setting. You don't have to worry about putting the right kind of stick in your magic potion in order to, in your holy drink. We can synthesize this. We can take it in a very controlled and safe kind of way, so therefore it's better. But the result ends up being the same. Perhaps we're tapping into things that we shouldn't be. But for the people who take it and have a positive experience, kind of goes back to what we said about Mormons, right? It's really hard to shake a spiritual experience, or even like charismatic. You can place that in a more positive context or a Christian context too. It's really hard to shake experience. So if their life is, from their perspective, terrible, and then they have a complete turnaround because of the psychedelic, then it must be good.
Or even like if you're a Christian and you dabble in this and it feels like a good experience. Once again, if I were strategizing for Satan, I'd be like, well, you could scare this person. Maybe you have the opportunity to break their mind, which does happen. But another good tool would be give them a good experience and then twist truth 20%. And then to your point, now that experience lives on with that person. So that person can live the next 50 years of their life. And as much as they might try to get to credo Christianity, they're always off kilter a little bit because this experience is sticking as an overwhelming data point.
Yeah. And maybe people did at times have legitimate medical breakthroughs with this stuff. Maybe there is, again, a legitimate medical use for it. But we're talking here about the recreational use of it.
Right.
Or the use of it for spiritual exploration. And it's almost always seen as a spiritual thing, just not from a Christian perspective. Like it is very much spiritual for those who try it.
Yeah.
Even if they wouldn't use that word.
Yeah. And that is helpful to say. I don't have any strong opinions on whatever they're doing with, was it ketamine that they're using for PTSD? I've got no data points for that. We're commenting on people using it for these specific spiritual, aims. But the one thing as you're talking, I'm thinking about like these are practices that we can watch through history. The one thing that is unique today is, if you look at, for the most part, Christian history, Christianity, at least in the West, goes in and it ends up over time kind of conquering paganism through various means. And then it kind of becomes, and then that area becomes a Christian nation. We're experiencing one of the first times where, in large in the West, Christian nations are moving back towards paganistic type, rituals and life. So this is one of the
sometimes very openly.
Yeah. So that is unique in that now these practices are being done by kind of lapsed Christians. Right. Which is, at least it's a little bit different than, just these nations that are pagan and have done these things kind of from the grass up.
Yeah. We'll have to see how that plays out. Will we be double cursed because of that? It's kind of worse to have known and then to go back.
Well, there's an interesting Michael Knowles. I don't know if you can find it, but Michael Knowles, he's on Daily Wire, and he's a Catholic, and he does, I think it was about a year ago, he did this interview with this gentleman. I don't know if Ben can find the name, but it was on drugs and hallucinogens, and his story was he was a very heavy drug user for a long time, just kind of in that lifestyle, and then he converts to Christianity, and he kind of keeps marijuana is kind of the one thing he keeps, but he moved away from the more heavy psychedelic ones, and he kind of always thought like he could explain away the more harsh ones he did, like cocaine and stuff, as like that was definitely bad. Don't ever want to do that again. The one he couldn't explain away intellectually was mushrooms. So for a long time he didn't do it, but he was kind of on the fence. And then his whole story centers around this time that he returns and he takes mushrooms and he has like this near-death experience, and he's like, wait, mushrooms can't kill you. And he hears this voice, and it's like God being like, who's to say I can't end your life right now? And he's just, but he has this really wild, yeah, that's it. A Christian took psychedelics. Does it say the guy's name? Catholic apologetics, I don't know. Yeah. Really wild story. Let's not play it because I don't know. You're going to cut it out? The video aspect? Okay. Yeah. It might be down there in the transcript too. But long story short, like his whole psychedelic one is like he's like there, and there's kind of this throne of light, and he's out here in the darkness, and he's kind of sitting there and he's watching these demons discuss what to do with him. And this like messenger comes and basically like has to like plead for him or something like that. But the key thing that he says that was really fascinating is because he's like, but I'm a Christian or whatever. And the demon like thing is like, but he ate off our table. Like he feasted on our table. And this guy's not like hyper trained. Like he's not like a high theologian or anything like that. But as he's presenting this, I'm like, that's really interesting that there's this counterpart to the Eucharist, where it's like now he's eaten the sacrament off of our table,
right?
Which is this physical means by which you're accessing our spiritual darkness. And it was a really fascinating one.
So we were talking about earlier, the devil wants to mimic that sacramental life. He wants to invert that.
Mm-hmm.
And so we think of it in terms of like the Black Mass, right? Everything's upside down, but this is an even better example of that. This is how he does it. He's found another sacrament, and it's this. And it could be any number of things. You're the devil. You're free to, invent whatever you want, I guess.
Yeah. Well, let's take a quick break and then a couple more areas.
Let's do it.
All right. Bennett says we're back. All right. So we get a couple other things to explore. But first I want to explore sleep paralysis and different experiences that we have kind of related to dreams, and, I can certainly share some stories. If we get a microphone on Bennett, he could share some stories. So
yeah, here he has a very good sleep paralysis story.
He does. But he's not going to tell.
He's not going to tell him.
I'll tell mine. Do you want me to tell mine now, or do you want to?
No, go ahead and tell yours so the folks at home know what we're talking about.
Yeah. So I think I might have mentioned this maybe 18 months ago or so, very early on. But so it was kind of interesting. I've had a lot of demonic type dreams, and they were mostly concentrated at a certain period of time. And it wasn't like I wasn't engaging in anything, creepy at that time. Looking back, it's kind of interesting. I was getting to the point where I was thinking about proposing to my girlfriend, who's now my wife. So it was kind of like, it was a time of wrestling, so I don't know if that, what to say about that. But so there was this one, I'm on vicarage. So the way that works is basically my living quarters is above a garage, and we got a living room, and go to bed, wake up, and I have sleep paralysis. So, so when you have sleep paralysis, your body doesn't move, but your mind is kind of activated, and seemingly you can use your eyes. So I wake up, realize I have sleep paralysis, like dang it, because, I know what this is like. And then all of a sudden I hear this sweeping noise out in the living room where there's a hardwood floor. So I'm hearing the sweeping noise. I'm like, goodness, like there's something out there. You kind of do a triple check. So I'm like, I got to get up, but I can't get up. Right. So I'm kind of like wrestling with my body, trying to, get my toes to move. That's usually kind of the trick. And then maybe you can get your foot, and then you can kind of kick your body out of it. So I'm doing that. And then I hear the door open, and immediately there's a presence in the room, very imposing, very dark. And I'm kind of so I'm actually like, my head's kind of to the side, so I can like see these things out of the corner of my eye, or this thing out of the corner of my eye. And so I'm struggling, and then boom, this heavy weight falls on me, right? And it just kind of looks like a black shadow. Now, if you get Bennett's story, it looks like a gargoyle that's on his chest, and he's got, kind of a similar story there. And that one seems to be more common when you hear these kind of stories.
Right.
So that goes on, and then, wrestling with that for what seems like a long time. I don't know, maybe it's like 20 seconds, something like that. And so I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? And then, so finally I start saying the Lord's Prayer. And then when I say the Lord's Prayer, I get to, what is it? Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come, it might have been thy will be done, or maybe on earth as it is in heaven, right around there. Then boom, my body flips over, and my covers kind of come off, and like the weight, like shifts to the side, and then the experience is done. But here's where it gets really interesting, right? So I'm razzled by this, right? So I get up and, I'm like, all right, like get up, wash my face. It's like 5 or 4:30 in the morning. So I'm like, okay, like I'm just going to get up for the day. And so I go and I'm like, I'm going to call my sister, right? Just because she works night shift at the time as a nurse. So I'm like, I'm just going to call her. I just need to like talk to somebody and like get my body and my mind to recognize I'm not sleeping anymore. So I go and my cell phone is not working. So I'm like trying to call and it's nothing. Call nothing. And so eventually I just get myself together and I go to the gym because I know that's going to be open. But it took like 30 minutes before my phone could work in any fashion. No connectivity, couldn't use the internet, nothing. So yeah, that's one experience. I could name others, but as kind of an introductory of what this sleep paralysis isn't always like that, but that's a common thread that there seems to be some kind of dark force.
Dark force, weight on you, weight on your chest. Sometimes gargoyles, like our AV professional over here, our producer. And other times like what you describe, commonality across cultures and across peoples. Modern speculation would say, oh, it's just a response to stress. But again, such similar experiences. Like you could see the symptoms being similar, but what you see, what you feel, what you perceive, that's all very interesting. And of course, there are records of this going way back into the past. Everybody said it was a demon. And it alleviates when you pray. We have similar anecdotes about this with alien abduction, that people were abducted or visited by the space aliens, and when they invoked the name of Jesus or said the Our Father or something like that, that the aliens went away. It always seems to be a pretty common experience when someone's in spiritual distress or demonic affliction, that calling upon the name of Jesus rescues them, oftentimes. And when we talk about demons, so if we can say like sleep paralysis is perhaps demonic, there might be a psychological version of it, but if you have a demon gargoyle on your chest or a shadow figure or your phone's fried, we're just going to go ahead and charitably say that's demonic, right? And the common denominator is invoking the name of Christ. Now, when we historically talk about demons and how they operate, there are a few levels. So there's like infestation, that would be like a house that's haunted. There is demonic possession, which is the one most people know, which is where a demon takes control of the person's faculties. And then there is demonic oppression, which is more like what happens in sleep paralysis. It's when demonic oppression is when someone is severely tempted or harassed by a demon, and sleep paralysis, at least the spiritual version of it, is definitely a form of harassment. It's there to intimidate you, to scare you. Celtic folklore has their version of it. English folklore has it. They don't call it sleep paralysis, but it's basically an imp that comes upon you and tries to suck the breath out of you or something like that. And it's one of those common phenomenon that different cultures had their own way of explaining it. But our duty is definitely, as Christians, to interpret everything through the lens of Scripture. And a lot of the time doing that, especially when it comes to this sort of thing, is leaning on tradition and history and experience to understand it a little bit better. Because somebody's going to come on the comments and go, nowhere in Scripture does it say that there's no psalm that talks about the sleep paralysis demon. Well, you have to add it all up. Yeah.
And what do you find? A horrifying creature that is there to intimidate and scare you and destroy you, seemingly, that runs from the name of Jesus or the invocation of the will of God. What else you want to call that? That's how we use rightly ordered reason to come to these conclusions. And we're not just making them up for the show. Everything we're talking about here has a long tradition in the church of that's how we understand it. Sometimes we're not willing or able to talk about spiritual warfare like we did earlier in the theoretical, right? How do angels do this? But then what do we do in response to that? So you have a perceived spiritual attack. Even if it's not spiritual, it's always right to call on the name of the Lord. And of course, I would believe that it is a spiritual attack. It's kind of hard to teach us this sometimes because, oh no, if I start talking about spiritual warfare and the armor of God, that sounds a little charismatic. If I start talking about reducing my drinking to 1 1/2 fifths a day, are people going to think I'm a Baptist? It's that kind of thing. And so
it's healthy for us to talk about this insofar as how we avoid this or how we fight this. There is sometimes an unhealthy speculation on the demonic. That's when I talked about the grimoires earlier and the naming of them, the really prying into it. But this isn't a case of prying into it. There's a demon gargoyle on my chest. So what's a good home remedy for this? And prayer is absolutely where you should go. Some people might say holy water, but if you're paralyzed, you can't go reach that. So what are you going to do?
Right. Yeah.
In the Lutheran Church, we don't have the robust history of sacramentals and bless things quite in the same way that the Roman Catholics do. So they would have, the Catholics and the Orthodox would have holy water and certain other things that we wouldn't in our theological tradition. But we certainly have prayer.
Yeah.
And we certainly have the sacraments.
And there's still examples of them. I think it's even in the Pastoral Companion. I forget which rite it is, but there's certain uses of oil.
There's certain uses
where it'll
of oil,
say like, if you're going to use
and,
this type of oil, do it at this point.
Yeah. Yeah, the anointing of the sick, and that, of course, comes right out of... That's one that we've jettisoned, actually, in large part. It's there in the Care Companion. We've forgotten about it, but it's right there in the Scriptures to be anointed by the elders. We might be surprised to find that these things work. And we've lost the practice of these things because we have sort of forgotten these maladies exist. We do over-psychologize everything, in my opinion, for liability purposes, in my opinion. Everything has a psychological or chemical component or medical component. And that's the only thing we can look at. So you can't possibly have, your mental affliction can't possibly be spiritually related. We can say that in sort of a positive sense, like, so go hear the gospel more, go to church more. But we never are like, hey, what are you doing that is causing this? Unless it's from a behavioral standpoint, right? So too much drug abuse destroys your dopamine receptors or something like that. I hear way too much of that kind of discussion. Now, it's needed, probably, and people need to have medical diagnoses, but we don't really talk a lot about what to do spiritually in the face of these kind of afflictions.
And yeah, to add to that, so, sharing that story with my wife, and she knew somebody who had a very similar experience, but it was very much ongoing. For about, I think, 3 years at the time. And I don't know what's happened to it since, but this was a friend of hers back in Canada, a guy, and, he was not a Christian. And he actually, he picked up drinking because he just, was scared to sleep. So he would kind of drink himself to sleep because he was terrified of what would happen because it was so consistent. And there was a guy I was listening to, I don't know him personally, but his story was somewhat similar, in that he was messing with astral projection or, this kind of realm. And all of a sudden there was an experience where a demon entered in and he wasn't able to shake it. And for him, it was the same thing. He was not a Christian. I think maybe he was a Christian at one point, but he had kind of walked away. So for 3 years, it was to the point where every time he looked in a mirror, he says there was a demonic figure there. So it was just always there for him. And he tried everything, as you can imagine anyone would. And it wasn't until he called upon Christ, and converted to, I think, Catholicism for this guy. But
it's fascinating.
Yeah, then it went away.
Because I've talked to people, more than a handful of people, who have had the same experience with the mirror following him. And in my research in these newer esoteric movements, one of the rituals they try to do is to try to get that mirror person.
Yeah.
They want them. So I've counseled people who didn't want it, inadvertently got it, and they're terrified. And then there are other religions out there that are actively trying to get this to happen. Fascinating stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And like you said, the whole theory is, or not the whole theory, but the whole takeaway is, Christ is the one that's going to have authority here.
Yes.
If you know people who are struggling with this and they're outside the church, this is a great inroad. It's just hey, give this a shot.
And it could be the means by which God drives them into his arms.
Yeah. He plays the long game very often. So, yeah, so there's sleep paralysis. So you want to shift to something else?
Let's do it.
All right. Cryptoids or cryptids.
Cryptids. Want to talk about cryptids? Of course we have to talk. I'm contractually obligated to talk about cryptids. So cryptids are those yet to be discovered, possibly animals,
Amen,
creatures out there. We believe in Bigfoot. He will show himself one day when we deserve it. And so, yeah, Bigfoot's the big one, right? Sasquatch. And you had mentioned this to me, kind of in discussion for the episode, because there are sightings of Bigfoot not only in modern, very blurry photographs, but also throughout history. So people have seen wild men at the edge of the woods. Mm-hmm. And sometimes they're a harbinger of bad things to come. Or sometimes they just come and plain kill everybody. But they're always kind of at the periphery of society. And we have seeming references to Sasquatch, Bigfoot-like characters in certain Native American folklore. Now, in my research on this, what I find is that a lot of reputable sources say, absolutely, these sound like Bigfoot. Others say, no, this is us reading Bigfoot into older sources. And yet others say, Native Americans don't say this is all made up. It certainly seems apparent to me that they do have big, hairy wild men in certain Indian traditions. Mm-hmm. And the explain away is usually, yeah, well, that was just people they exiled or scary humans or whatever. But there's always a little bit more to it, and especially when you bring in something like the Wendigo, which is sort of Bigfoot-ish, but much more supernatural, depending on how it happens.
Where's that coming out of?
Native American.
Native American,
yeah.
Okay.
And so, and the tribes, there's every tribe has its own folklore, own kind of traditions about it. Kind of the problem with American Indian folklore is they're very guarded about it. So it is true that some of what we have, especially when you're looking at, are there cryptids here, like a Bigfoot or a Sasquatch, which I think that it's pretty obvious that some of them did have sightings like a Bigfoot. Mm-hmm. And that could have been passed on to American settlers. And the American settlers could have saw the same thing, talked to the Indians about it, and that was the explanation. But a lot of the tribes keep their folklore very guarded. So one of the examples of that would be the skinwalker. So that's kind of the big new cryptid everybody talks about.
Ooh,
but it's
I don't know much about him.
Navajo folklore.
Is it a him?
I'm sorry?
Is it a him?
It can be a him. It's usually a him, but I think it could be either or. It's a type of witch that can transform into an animal. And they'll wear like the animal skins and transform into the animal. The problem is a lot of what we have about the skinwalker isn't really from good research, because the Navajo, where it comes from, are very, very hesitant to talk about it. Mm-hmm. They obviously believe it because they're legitimately spooked when a skinwalker comes up. But that's about all we really know about the ins and outs of it. It's really hard to do research on that. But you'll see skinwalker movies now. That's where Skinwalker Ranch, where all the paranormal happenings happen. That's where it gets its name.
Man. Have you looked into that?
I have. Of course I have. What do you...
Okay, let's jump into that. I watched that maybe it was during COVID, right? When you're just deep diving all these
we'll get back
ridiculous
to things. Yeah, so what's your thoughts on Skinwalker Ranch?
So if there are areas, right, as we were talking about earlier, that have a propensity towards, so for instance, if horrific things happen in an area that seems to correspond.
That would certainly be one of them.
Yeah. So there seems to be that there's something there. I mean, so there were the skinwalkers walking around. There was also it seemed like almost like a black hole type.
The black hole type
thing.
Stuff.
Yeah. So I'm trying to remember all the details.
Horses.
Yeah.
Lights.
I want to believe it. I'll put it that way.
Yeah. Let's just choose to believe it.
Yeah.
Life's more fun if you choose.
Well, there's a ton of, if I remember right, there's a ton of accounts from a lot of different people across ownership, right? Like it's even sold, and then someone with a ton of money comes in and buys the land.
And I try to always read the debunkings on this, and on Skinwalker Ranch, it's like, well, those people are making it up, or those stories aren't true. I'm like, but the guy said it. Yeah. No, he didn't. But he's right here on. No, he didn't say it.
Yeah. So maybe explain it for those that.
Well, it's a ranch out west where strange phenomena happen. I mean, that's kind of the simplest way we can explain it. It's been sold, allegedly government involvement at some point. And so all kinds of strange supernatural happenings, creatures are seen on this, aerial phenomena are seen. People who visit there allegedly have entities follow them back, feel like they're being followed or punched or pushed. Mm-hmm. It's one of those famous, for lack of a better word, haunted places, even though it kind of goes beyond the normal haunting. Normal haunting account is you have a ghost, but you've got everything in this one.
Yeah. Well, there's even they're damaging the, they're killing off the cattle and things like that.
Killed. I mean, that's also why it's popular in the UFO community, because of the cattle mutilations associated with that. So what's killing the cattle? Mutilating the cattle, not even eating the cattle, but just mutilating it, sometimes draining it of its blood, sometimes just cutting chunks out of it. Just really strange stuff. Mm-hmm. And so that became really popular in pop culture for a while there. I don't know, maybe the show's still on, the reality show about it. That's when credulity is strained, though, once because there was a long tradition of this, and then they made a TV show. And once you make a TV show where weekly new things have to happen, that's where people start to get a little bit skeptical.
Yeah. I only watched like the documentary style where I told the story.
And it's interesting stuff. It's kind of like Ghost Hunters. Like that became a big fad in the early 2000s. But then everybody was seeing a ghost everywhere in those shows. And they ran for 400 seasons and things like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't always lend credibility to true research on it or to a true perspective on it. And I specifically didn't mention any shows because, we don't want to get you in any trouble with your show here. But just say on some of those shows, I'm a little bit skeptical. So you got like a Skinwalker Ranch and then the ghost hunting shows. What's some other fun cryptids, right? You got Nessie, the Loch Ness Monster. She's probably not real. Hate to say that to the folks at home. There's the Chupacabra, which we like. The
New Mexico area, right?
Puerto Rico is how I first learned it, but I think it's kind of everywhere now. Yeah, he sucks the blood of goats, the Chupacabra. My personal favorite, the Mothman out of West Virginia.
Now that's a fascinating.
He's 100% real.
Yeah.
And the book about it's good. Some people don't like the methodology there, but I don't care. It's a good book. And he appeared and then the bridge fell. And it's still kind of a big deal back where I'm from. The Mothman Festival. People remember when the bridge fell and all that. So
for those that don't know, like the Mothman, there were from multiple people. There was this visions of a Mothman looking thing.
Of a big black creature with wings and red eyes, and he sort of showed up, and then the bridge in this town collapses
after like months of him showing up.
Yeah, he shows up here and there, and it's like a portend of doom. And I believe the Mothman because people said they saw it where I'm from, and I'm duty bound as an Appalachian to believe anything they say. And also the explanations for them are silly. It's like, it was an owl. Do you think a mountain man doesn't know what an owl looks like?
Yeah.
It's kind of like Bigfoot. It was just a bear. Well, I believe like a tourist would think a bear was Bigfoot, but not Grizzly Adams over here. So then, excuse me, why are we talking about cryptids at all? A, it's fun, but B, what does it have to do with the Bible and our spiritual life? On the one hand, not too much. On the other hand, the Bible has them. We've got Behemoth. We have Leviathan. So we've got a land cryptid and we've got a sea cryptid. I can't remember if Answers in Genesis is the one that just makes them into dinosaurs. No, Answers in Genesis makes them into dinosaurs, which is great, which is better. The old explanation, like Behemoth is clearly an elephant. Like an elephant does not look
or a hippo.
Anything, or a hippo. Neither of which look anything like that. Or the Leviathan. There are, although I think you got a better chance of making Behemoth a real thing. You could argue that Leviathan is a poetic device, but for the sake of argument, let's say that he's talking about real animals. There are big, strange animals out there, and every once in a while, we're lucky enough to discover one that we thought was extinct or we never saw before. When we were kids, they said there were no giant squids; that was just tall tales from sailors. Until we found the giant squid, we don't know what's out there. Cryptids are good because to study because it adds a sense of wonder. And then at the same time, if you want to dig deeper, it might add something more. So you go back to Sasquatch and you take the sort of supernatural approach to him that maybe he just looks fuzzy, but also that there are some Bigfoot researchers who think that it's actually a spiritual creature, more akin to a demon because he can appear, disappear, make strange sounds, kind of like a poltergeist would. And the UFO community really doesn't like bringing that into it. But there are UFO researchers who have said there is something kind of spiritually nefarious about this creature. And if you think about it, that makes sense. I mean, it makes sense that it's not real. It makes sense that he could be real. And it makes sense that he could be a spiritual creature too. So there are ways of looking at these things that are, at least from my perspective, very, very interesting. I don't want to call Bigfoot a demon because I don't want kids with like Bigfoot dolls to think that I'm, trying to shame them or anything. It's perfectly fine. There may or may not be a large Bigfoot silhouette in my driveway. I don't know. I can neither confirm nor deny that. But what if these things are real? What if what if demons are real, which we've said they are, and we've already conceded that they can have at times physical appearances. So that could extend to the cryptid too. And then if we want to have Behemoth and Leviathan as cryptids, then those are just plain big undiscovered animals, right? Or at least unidentified animals. The chupacabra, something's messing with those goats. All of these things is kind of fun to poke, or it's fun for people to poke fun at those who research these because they see it as futile. Well, they're tilting at windmills here. They're going after something. They're snipe hunting. These are things that aren't real until one day somebody gets lucky and bags them, or until one day we discover that there is something more to this. And unfortunately, it might be that the lesson is we shouldn't have been messing around with these things in the first place. But you take something like Bigfoot that can be simultaneously a popular American icon, a fun guy for kids, or a very serious research project, both from the zoological and the spiritual. And I think, hey, that's worth looking into. That's worth talking about, and people enjoy talking about that. Arkansas has their own Bigfoot, the Fount Monster. They made a 70s drive-in classic about it, The Legend of Boggy Creek. Charles Pierce wrote it. Also did The Town That Dreaded Sundown. That influenced Friday the 13th Part 2. It's now all of a sudden a very different podcast when I'm going into all the trivia here. But the Boggy Creek movie was a huge drive-in success and really helped spur on the modern Bigfoot lore. Of course, we had the Patterson-Gimlin footage. That's the famous footage of Bigfoot.
Which they've done a lot of analysis on.
They've done a lot of analysis on that. And some people will say that it was admitted to being a fake. It actually has not, and that's not verifiable. The person who did that. Of all the Bigfoot videos, that one gets more and more convincing every year with every enhancement.
They did a scan just on the way they walked, and they could not get the best athletes to mimic the way it walked, like the way the shoulder positioning was, the way the knees lined up with, the hips. I mean, it didn't walk like a human walks.
Right. And so people are like, well, that's just silly. Like, look, if there's an 8-foot tall ape man out in the Pacific Northwest, I want to know about it.
Yeah. And and what I value about that too is it pushes back on, the materialist, like hyper scientific method approach. Like, we've made the world entirely small. And it reawakens this idea that there are a ton of things that we don't understand.
The sense of exploration. One might even say the sense of dominion, the dominion mandate that we're given. It's something that we should not just roll our eyes at. I mean, because we don't know what's out there. We don't know everything. And so to speculate about it or look at the evidence of it, that's a fairly healthy pursuit for a human to do. We used to do this with the oceans more. Now we don't do that as much. Or so they say, whoever they is.
They.
But yeah, you make an excellent point there. I mean, it's part of that small world. It doesn't exist if I can't see it out there. I can't see a giraffe from where we were recording from in Minnesota. Therefore, they don't exist. Somebody probably said that about a giraffe once. We know they said that about tons of animals, even about things like lions or alligators. Mermaids, which they try to say are manatees, but I'm not buying that one. There were all kinds of these animals that sailors would come back with saying, no, these are real. We're like, you're crazy. You're explorers. No. And then here they are.
So let me pivot here. What time are we at, Bennett? It's 9:15. Okay. I've got two other. Okay. I've got two more. One, you can pass on this one, but I know you guys are at B-Hop. You guys are, and we're fitly spoken before this, right? You guys are big on the weather. Is there any deeper meaning behind that? Or is it just like, is there any kind of fascination with the weather and having, more to do with it than just...
Well, without spoiling the meme, we'll put it this way. The heavens declare the glory of God, and God gave us times and seasons to mark things out, the stars and everything. And so that's just part about it. Plus, it's just friendly to ask each other how the weather is. It's just being a good neighbor.
That's good Southern hospitality.
That's right. That's right.
Well, then, last thing I'll ask. So you are also an avid expert on guns. So I don't own a gun, which I'm kind of ashamed to say. There's been different times that we planned on it, and then we ended up moving before the gun came in, things like that.
Yeah.
So will you sell me one of your guns? And if so, and even just say yes either way, then how would you walk me through what gun to get?
Okay. Well, first of all, if I sold it to you, it would be across state lines. We'd have to follow all state and local laws. Transferring it to a federally licensed firearms dealer. Number 2, what would I recommend for you? What do you want to do with it? I guess is what I would ask.
Well, I think the biggest one would be self-defense, in that we should have one in the house.
Sure.
Right. So that would be the first thing. Right. I like the idea of me going and shooting more. Like I've shot in the past. I've told you I've taken, a course at Sig Sauer back when we were in New Hampshire. Realistically speaking, with our 4 young kids, there's not that much time that I have to get away and enter into a new hobby like shooting. So.
Right. Okay. So now this is we've just tripled the length of the episode, and you're going to get all kinds of opinions on this. So you want it primarily for home defense, not necessarily carry.
Correct.
Okay, so that frees you up as far as the size you can go. You were shooting at SIG, so you're probably shooting 9mm, so you feel comfortable with that caliber. So we're looking at a full size 9mm. Do you want a safety on the gun?
Yes.
You want a manual safety. Mm-hmm. Do you prefer it have a hammer or be striker fired?
I don't know.
That means, will you see the hammer go back now? Because that's going to give you more options for guns with safeties on them.
Okay.
Certain striker-fired guns can be had with safeties. You can get a Smith & Wesson M&P. That would be a good choice. A Glock 17, that's their full-size 9mm, the kind of the standard model. No safety, just the trigger safety. So it does have a safety, but no manual safety. Mm-hmm. You could also join the master race and buy a Beretta 92, the greatest 9mm handgun of all time, but it does take a little bit of time to master that trigger.
Okay.
But it does have a safety, which completely disconnects the trigger. Your first trigger pull will be a long trigger pull to cock that hammer. It will then fire the round. As the slide goes back for each subsequent round, the hammer will be cocked. So it'll be a light trigger pull after that. Beretta 92. That's classic double action, single action pistol. Now, if your wife's going to shoot it, though, the grips on that can be a little bit tricky. But the good news is Beretta is now making their Vertec grip frame again, although they don't call it that. So it's a much smaller grip frame for average size and smaller hands. So there's a lot more customization, available for that. So you got a lot of options there. A lot of options, but if you want a safety, then it's going to reduce the options a little bit.
Do you think I should have a safety? I've heard different opinions on this.
That's up to your level of comfort. When I worked in gun shops trying to do this, I would never say, just get used to it. Mm-hmm. And there's a point where you say that, but when you're learning to be new with this, you want to go with, if you're more comfortable with it, you're more likely to take it and practice with it and actually use it. And so you're better off that way. Some would say safety is a liability.
Because in the moment.
Yeah. And so that gets you back to that double action, single action. You don't have to have a safety engaged, or you can get one that just decocks the hammer. And then you get that very long trigger pull.
Is that what the SIG 320 does?
The SIG 226 will do that for you.
Okay.
It has the decocker in it. That would be an excellent choice. And people would respect you all over the world if you bought a SIG P226.
Well, that's kind of what I'm going for too.
All right. And it's metal framed. It's a classic. It's a classic for a reason. So we should put you on the spot and say you're going to go try to find a P226 now.
That's the one?
That would be one. And if you want to upgrade, you can look around for one of those in 40 if you want a bigger caliber.
Do you have the 226?
I might have a 226.
Okay.
If
Bennett and the stream.
If you want to be a real connoisseur, you find like a 357 SIG one. Now you're getting into niche calibers. You're getting into hard to find ammo, but very cool ammo. And you want cool guy points, right?
I do.
So I think really what you're saying is you actually have 3 to 5 different models that you need to buy, to really round things out, to be well rounded.
Eric Radinsky would be proud of me.
He would be.
Yeah.
As he should be.
Yes. Okay, so it sounds like the 226.
Yeah, take a look at the SIG P226. But again, that trigger is going to be a little trickier for you to master for your first gun. But no pain, no gain.
Yeah. Okay, is this the first time you've ever not sold, but talked about selling?
Like live? Yeah, live? We're not doing a gun deal. We're walking through how the process would work. And, if you were looking for one, what you would buy. And that's kind of what it would look like. You can also get the Beretta 92 with a decocker only. So then you don't have the safety, but you still get that longer trigger pull.
Okay.
And you can make that trigger very, very nice if you want to.
YouTube is going to hate this video.
Oh, absolutely. We have just completely nuked the...
What's that? Yeah, that's true.
So yeah, anything else I can help you with as far as that?
No, I think that's good. This was a blast.
Yeah.
Yeah. We'll have to have you back out.
Yeah. Anytime.
Yeah. All right. Well, Willie, cheers.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.